and broadcast on Lunenburg Public Access and is available on YouTube for viewing at a later time, and will be run on Lunenburg Public Access as well. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from the Fire Department, the Police Department, and the Board of Health in terms of their budget requests. And before we get started with that, I guess I'll start with, do we have any public comment from anyone on the committee? And do we have any public comment from anybody in the public? Okay, tonight's snacks are an apple raisin cake, blueberry cookies, molasses cookies, and please come to the next meetings. Yes, we're trying to just come on out and get some information, and we'll feed you too. So this only lasts through the public hearing on the budget, which will be March 28th. So we'll be running weekly until March 28th when we have the final discussion on the budget prior to town meeting. So if we have no public comment, I do have a copy of the Beacon. I'll pass that down if anybody would like to review it. And then we also received a mosquito control board report that is talking about the proposed budget amount that's increased from FY19 and the estimated balance. And we probably won't discuss that tonight. I haven't had a chance to do anything other than open the envelope. And with that, if the fire chief is ready, and he appears to be ready.
Almost.
Okay.
Waiting for the computer to finish booting up.
Okay, if we're, then I can skip around, I'll jump around the agenda. Do we have any committee or department updates while we wait?
Not I. Committee. I talked to the fire chief earlier. The delivery of the ladder truck has been pushed out into sometime next fall because of manufacturing delays.
Okay,
Factory's about 4 months behind right now. I just spoke to the sales rep today. Wasn't what I wanted to hear. But
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that wasn't what you wanted to hear at all. I'm also just checking to see if it's something that's available on people's monitors at home.
he has a copy of the presentation.
Yeah, I know he has a copy of the presentation, but he hasn't put it up yet, so it's just... Okay. Sullivan.
This is, the cord isn't quite long enough. So, again, for those of you that aren't familiar with the fire department, we're an all-hazard emergency response agency. Basically, if it's not involving law enforcement, we're usually the call, whether it's fire, hazardous materials, emergency medical services, specialized rescue, all falls under the under the fire department. Currently, our makeup is myself, a full-time administrative assistant, 4 career officers, 2 career firefighters, 5 call fire officers, and approximately 38 call firefighters and EMTs. We operate 3 engines, 1 ladder truck, 2 brush units, 2 ambulances licensed to the advanced EMT level, and 4 utility and support vehicles. The big change, obviously, from last year is we do now have 24-hour coverage in the station with the addition of 2 full-time staff. So currently we run 2 full-time personnel Monday through Saturday, 24/6. The Sunday shift is 2 per diem firefighters, again for the Sunday 24-hour period. That's supplemented by an additional per diem person Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and myself and the administrative assistant when we're available as well. So total hours per week are 288 career hours and 88 per diem hours per week. So we are staffed at least with 2 people 24/7. Again, other duties that we do besides emergency response, fire prevention, safety education, code enforcement, One of the reasons for having the extra person during the daytime is not only the fact that a lot of our call personnel are out of town working their regular jobs, is just to handle the volume of inspections. Having the third person allows the shift officer to conduct the inspections, go out and do those, and we still have 2 people to respond with the ambulance. And that person can break away if necessary. And again, there's also obviously administrative support, training, maintenance, data collection, and as I'm the emergency management director, that also kind of falls in with us as well. We've talked about training. I won't spend a lot of time on that. It's roughly 240 hours for a brand new firefighter to train. We just had 2 graduate from the Call Volunteer Fire Academy last night. Another 100+ hours for emergency medical technician. And when we talk about paramedic later on, the people that are undergoing paramedic training, that's approximately 16 to 18 months worth of training, of over 2,000 hours for that. Call volume last year, 1,942 incidents. 982 of those were EMS related. Again, it is about 65% of our call volume, which is pretty much normal for most fire departments across the country. EMS is, the main part of what we do, but we still have to be prepared for fires, hazardous materials incidents, specialized rescue, all of that as well. Just a quick shot of how our responses have been running. That runs from 2008 to 2018, if you can't read the small numbers from there. That's just a breakdown of the call volume by hours during the day from the years 2014 to 18, and just added in when we're staffed with 2 people and when we're staffed with 3 people. Again, we continue to be busy into the evening hours. And again, the point I would make is it's not like we're never moving at night either. In fact, if you can ask the guys, we've had quite a spell lately that all the calls seem to come in between midnight and 6 a.m. lately. One thing I always like to point out is the effect of new growth in our community. This has been based off the last several large-scale projects in the last 11 years, whether it's Emerald Place, Tri-Town, Rogers Way, and some of the smaller single-family homes. But again, from back when the development started around 2007 up until the present day. And again, the biggest thing we see is the increase in EMS calls and that. Inspections usually taper off once the projects are done, as do some of the fire calls. We're not getting as many alarm calls, things like that. But we do still stay busy with the EMS. That's by project. Again, the takeaway out of all that and the fancy colors and that, again, the densely populated multifamily developments is where we see a lot of our business. There's more people per square foot, so we see a lot more activity out of those. And again, this just shows over the last several years too, our EMS transports by age. Again, our biggest customer is our aging population, which is something you see across the country. Baby boomers are lasting longer, people are living longer, they're living at home with much more complex medical conditions, but we do still see them as customers, and that trend stays pretty much the same every year. Grant funding, again, we've gone after several. We received the EMPG funding from the state emergency management protective grants. It provided us some additional protective equipment. We've gotten the SAFE grants from the state for education, for fire safety and awareness with both grade school children and senior citizens to the tune of $7,200. That allows us to bring in the fire safe trailer that we do a training with the kids, be able to pay some of our people to go down and work with the kids, teach them fire safety, to go out, work with the community, with the Eagle House, with senior centers for things like fall protection, fire safety. The smoke detector project, we've worked in conjunction with the Eagle House, providing buckets of sand for elderly that can't get out and get them for their walkway. And as part of that, our fire prevention people will go in and do a safety inspection on their home. And through grant money, we've been able to get smoke detectors that if they don't have any, we can install them. And what we've still found as a trend is about 50% of the houses we find don't have them in them. It's usually under state law, you're supposed to have them, but it doesn't usually get caught until you go to sell your home. So you still do run into that sometimes. And unfortunately, when you see this, the statistics nationwide, you still see a lot of these fires. People are dying. They had no working smoke detectors. Proposed budget, the 2020 proposed budget, I've had some conversation back and forth with the town manager. We had updated what the original budget was. She originally provided me funding enough to add another position to keep moving forward with the paramedic. One of the challenges we've run into, though, is where we've kind of grown up quickly. We weren't really able to cover our overtime commitments to cover shifts. So after a lot of conversations with her, we reworked the budget, put that money towards covering some of that overtime liability and covering some of the paramedic training for that. And I'll talk about that a little bit further along. And again, my above target requests are still as part of that 4 to 5 year plan to add staff to develop more paramedic capability down the road. So again, salary line items, the numbers in parentheses for 2020 were proposed amounts for an additional position, and that I'll talk about that a little bit more. Again, right now we're 6, not counting myself and my administrative assistant. There's 6 line firefighters. The above target request would be to add a 7th one. Again, to try to have that person hopefully hire them as a paramedic. We would continue at 84 to 88 hours a week of per diem coverage. And again, that would maintain the existing call force. One thing I'm not sure if everybody understands, with 2 people in the station, that covers the ambulance, or it gets the first engine on the road with just 2 people. We still need everybody else coming back. We need the full-timers coming back for calls. I need a robust call force coming in behind it, because 2 people, especially on a fire call, doesn't do much. To really handle even a simple, small structure fire, you need 14 to 16, if not more, to get that job done. So the 2 people give us an initial response, they give us the ambulance, get that on the road, but it's not the end-all, be-all. When I talk about the staffing with 7, there was a couple options with that. One would be to go from the current 3-shift system to 4 shifts. 3 shifts would have 2 people, 2 firefighter EMTs on it. 1 shift would be a full-time person and a per diem, and we'd maintain that additional per diem person during Monday through Friday. The other option would have that 7th person on more of a admin schedule. People work 4 12-hour shifts a week. That person would cover some of the daytime time, and we could redistribute some of the per diem coverage to either increase a little bit of coverage on the weekend or spread that out. Either option would have to be negotiated. They're not really spelled out. Either one of those would be a significant change to the collective bargaining agreement, so that would be something that would have to be worked out. Just to sort of try to explain the overtime, because I know a couple people, I think, had a little sticker shock when they saw the numbers that came up. If you go back to FY17, we had 3 full-time people. They worked Monday through Friday, 12-hour days. They basically had 1 day off during the regular workday week. So really, any day that somebody was off shift, there wasn't a full-time person to cover them. We covered them with a per diem person. So they really couldn't fill their own shifts. Virtually, our overtime budget was small. That was mostly for callbacks and training. In 18, we added an additional person. We extended the coverage during the week to 192 hours total during the week. So we were able to cover Monday through Friday plus Friday night with a career person or career people, plus we had per diem on the weekends. Going to that cycle, it allowed one full-timer was off on any given day of the week. So if there was a shift opening, somebody was off for vacation, sick, whatever, there was 1 person available to work. So it had slightly increased our overtime. In 19, we added the 2 positions. We went to 6 full-time personnel, cover 6 days a week, up to 288 hours of career coverage a week. And just to try to explain it, now any given day, there are 4 people that are off on a particular day. There are more opportunities for someone to work the overtime. And under the collective bargaining agreement, the full-timers have right of first refusal on their shifts, which to my way of thinking, is only fair. If they don't take it, then it's filled by the per diem shifts, per diem personnel. The first few months of FY19, we've covered approximately 62% of our career shift coverage with career people and 38% with per diem. So again, like I said, they have right of first refusal. It's their full-time job. If none of them want to fill it, it goes to a per diem person, then it would go back to them. If none of them take it, one of them's forced to work. The per diem shifts go to per diem personnel first. If none of them take it, it's offered to the career people. It's only happened twice in 4 or 5 years so far, so it doesn't usually happen that often. We currently have about 20 per diem qualified personnel.
Okay, Chief, just a...
Nope,
okay.
want me to go
you're
back?
right. Nope, you know what?
Nope.
You're going to answer
The numbers that I put in were based on an average overtime rate of the existing staff. It was based off whatever, depending, again, we have one person who's been here over 25 years and a couple that haven't even been here a year yet. So the time varies, but it's based on their vacation time, personal time, some, but not all of the sick time as an average. Holiday coverage, now they work holidays, and some callback. And it's based on, the numbers I put in were based on 70% of that total overtime amount, because that's about what we're covering right now. And again, the question was asked earlier about whether we could, just not fill one of them. With only 2 people on, we don't have that option. We have to fill person for person. Even with the per diem person in the daytime, we need the 3 people during the daytime. Some larger departments that have multiple people working, they can drop a couple people and save on a little bit of the overtime. But that's because they have 8, 10, 12, 14 people working to begin with. We don't have that option.
Okay, so when you're setting the budget and you're putting the figure in, what you're basically saying is if I have 6 employees and I'm anticipating there's going to be this many vacation days, this many holidays, this many sick days, then, and I'm assuming that all of that's going to be covered with, or 70% of that's going to be covered with career people doing overtime.
Yes, correct.
So basically, every time you add a person, you're factoring in all of their holiday time, their vacation time, et cetera, as
the same thing.
requiring overtime.
See in the overtime, in the above target requests, under overtime, there was 14,000 there. That would be for one new person. That's about 60 to 70% of their expected overtime.
But it could actually run to 100%.
In theory, it could. In practice, I don't know. I know Chief Marino, they operate a similar way. They use their reserves. If the full-timers don't fill it, I don't know what his ratio is on that. And again, some of this is the challenges. We've never had 24-hour coverage, so we're sort of, I don't have any numbers to go back on.
Sure.
And that, I'd like to say, I originally was going to put in 100%, but what we're finding is right now we're covering between 60 and 70%, so
Well, I
right
think
now,
that's also where some of the confusion comes from, is that, okay, so as we have shifts that are covered by career staff, then they now have the right of first refusal on every shift.
Correct.
So every time you bring somebody in as career staff, you're increasing the likelihood that the overtime is also going to go up.
there would be an increase,
Right.
potentially.
And probably
with it.
at a greater,
It's possible. My thought would be that you could see that. The other advantage they have with the per diems is that they don't get forced to work, and that they can be offered to a per diem. Because eventually somebody has to stay.
Right.
And so it works for them as well, too. So,
okay. Thank you.
yep. So again, that was just, the overtime was 14,000, was estimated 70% of the overtime cost for an additional person. The clothing allowance above target request was one additional clothing allowance. The additional money was increased in the training line item is the estimated coverage for our people that are attending paramedic training right now. I'll talk about that a little bit further on. I have one of the new hires, because we weren't able to hire paramedics. We hired basics, and we are going through the process of training them as paramedics. So when they have to attend class, right now, if they're on a day off, they're just on their own time. If they're working, we give them the time off to go, and that's an estimate for a year and about a half of paramedic coverage from what I've estimated on hours for so far, of how often I have to cover somebody for 6 or 8 hours while they attend school and then come back to their shift. I say 1.5 because I'll have one person starting in September that will be going to the following December. I have one that will be finishing up by December. So for about 3-month period, I'll have 2 of them attending school at the same time. The above target request and outside EMS training is the cost for paramedic schooling. It's approximately $16,000 a year out of Mount Wachusett for their paramedic program, which they just started up recently, which has been, the price range is competitive to other paramedic programs. The advantage they have is they're here right nearby in Gardner, and that we can send somebody from shift. They can go up, they can come back. There's programs that are faster, there's programs that are longer, there's programs that are further away. This one seems to work the best because it's local for our personnel. And again, that's based on, the $21,000 was in there, is based on 1 student, full year school, and 1 finishing in approximately December of 2020. And we had slight increase, we've seen an increase in our costs on office supplies. I've asked for a slight increase in that line. Training supplies, again, books, materials for the paramedic students, that seems to be about $2,000 that we've run into so far, so look to an increase on that. And we also had a small, I think this was a typo from last year, there was a $60 increase in the hydrant rental fees between the Lunenburg Water District and the city of Leominster, so we have several of their hydrants in town, and that was just put in to correct that. Again, a little bit about the paramedic training. At FY19, we hired 2 personnel. We had 2 paramedics apply, both withdrew. Right now, licensed paramedics are in high demand in the state, and towns that pay better than we do are attracting these guys. So we ended up hiring 2 of our existing call firefighters with the stipulation that they were going to have to become paramedics at some point. One has started paramedic training in September of last year. He will be going until December of 19, approximately. The second one will start this fall in September. He may be actually starting a couple classes in the summertime. We did that mostly just to keep the burden down on the shift coverage and spread that out. But like I had said, it's approximately $16,000 a year for training. The program is about 16 months long. And again, the shift coverage is going to depend on what their schedule is for when they have classes, when they have to go do their clinical times. As again, this total program is over 2,000 hours between classroom, clinical evaluations, and then actually going out and doing ride-along and street time with an active paramedic unit. So the timeline for paramedic right now, based on that, again, fall 18, we started training 1 person. Summer, fall of 19, the second person will start training. As of right now in FY21, I have the request for the first batch of ALS equipment on the capital plan to fit out 1 ambulance, not both, but 1. To start, it would be sometime in early 2020, the first person would be able to certify as a paramedic, and probably 21 for the second person. Assuming that we have 2 people licensed and a plan to continue to get additional people to provide the 24-hour coverage, we could apply for the license probably sometime in mid-21. The original estimates I had last year was based on being able to hire paramedics right off the bat, and it was a little bit quicker time frame. Unfortunately, that's not working out right now. I talked to another department that's trying to hire paramedics right now. They've had an application up for about 3 weeks. They've had 1 apply, and that's another local community. Again, the state allows us 3 years from the time of issuance of the license to provide 24/7 paramedic coverage, which means we're supposed to have a paramedic available all the time. To achieve that, we'll still need 2 to 3 more paramedics. Right now, I would assume if we continue using, going with the 4-year plan of hiring a person a year, assuming if we don't hire someone this year, we'd be looking at 2024. We would have paramedic coverage before that point, but there would be days that we might not have one on duty. By 2024, we would have enough people, there would be one on, available all the time. Again, hiring schedule, Hiring one a year from FY '21 achieves this. If we hired one guy this year off the above target, we could get it done probably a year earlier. There's a little bit on vehicle maintenance. Again, as I've said before, as the equipment ages, repair costs increase, and it also the bigger problem for us is it increases out of service time. We've had some cost savings through having a DPW mechanic. We've hit a hiccup when the mechanic left. They brought a new person on. We're working on that. I know there had been some questions about the vehicle maintenance schedules, which I believe you guys had all received through the town manager on what we do. Again, some of the stuff has to go out. We try to get as much stuff done here through the town mechanic as possible, but with the complexity of some of the newer vehicles, they have to go out for some stuff. And I told you what we had for apparatus earlier. Generally, pumpers, we expect to get 20, 25 years out, ladder truck 25 to 30, forestry units about 30 years, ambulance is about 10, and the support vehicle's about 10. And again, that can vary, depending on the vehicle. That's just a snapshot of the next 5 years for the capital plan. And again, it shows in 2021 and 22, show requests to fit out ALS equipment for the ambulances. In 2022 and 23, I have earmarks in there to start replacing our breathing apparatus as that stuff is starting to age out. We've currently got 4 that are technically we really shouldn't even be using them anymore because they're over 20 years old. We are applying for federal grants for that. Got ahead of myself a little bit there. We've applied for assistance to firefighters grants through the feds. We'd applied for that for Ladder 1 for several years. Unfortunately, we were turned down on it. Part of the challenge with that is a requirement that they want to see the average age of your fleet being more than 20 years old. We had tried to go with the ladder because the ladder is 30 years old. A couple other towns had just looked at that type of vehicle. That didn't go, and unfortunately with the pumps, we're under 20 years old, average age, because we have one that's well over 20, but we also have one that's only a couple of years old. For a breathing apparatus, we have applied for a grant in the amount of $282,000 to replace the breathing apparatus. On the federal grant, that's a 5% match for that. So if we were awarded that, the town's part of that would be $14,000. That's to replace all of our self-contained breathing apparatus. So again, impact of the budget as recommended through the town manager's budget. We would continue to have staff 24/7, career staffing 6 days a week, 1 day a week with per diem staffing. The ambulance would still continue to be covered at the advanced level on most days. Our overtime would be funded at a sustainable, proper level, and we would have some continued funding for paramedic training to continue that moving on. If the above target numbers were accepted, it would give us 1 additional firefighter, EMT, paramedic. We could potentially cover having career staff coverage 7 days a week. For us, that means I have an officer available. I don't have to worry about having an on-call officer on a Sunday. Gives us a little bit more of an advantage there. And it would give us the possibility of obtaining paramedic coverage 1 year earlier. And we continue funding training for the current 2 members. Anybody we're hiring now from last summer on is either going to be a firefighter medic, or it will be with the written understanding that they will obtain their paramedic at some point. And that's it.
Hannah?
So back on slide 12, you have grants for the safety education from K to 3rd grade.
Yes.
Is there anything preventing it from going to the higher grades?
No, that's what we've applied for.
Okay.
We can go higher with that. We have done that in years past. Didn't get the return that we've got with the younger kids.
Yeah.
The research has found usually the younger kids, you can impress it on them a little bit more. They're not 10 feet tall and bulletproof when they're getting older.
Right. And then on slide 26, you said that you have 2 paramedics that withdrew from the training.
We had 2, when we opened the positions up, we had 2 paramedics apply, and they both withdrew. They couldn't take the pay scale
Okay.
One was going to be taking a significant pay cut. One took a job with another department that was paying significantly more.
And then you said that you have 2 people that it's in like the guidelines that they have to become.
We worked out an agreement with them and with the union when we hired them that they are required to obtain their paramedic training.
Is that like a contract and?
It's an agreement that if they flunked out or they left within 3 years, they would have to pay back the cost of the training.
Exactly what I was going to ask. Thank
Yes.
you.
We stole it from Westminster. They went the same route sort of we went. This is what they had used.
Okay.
I've been kind of modeling what they did. So.
Anyone else up here? John?
I've got just a couple. First of all, the good presentation. It's
Thank
very
you.
clear, very comprehensive. Your responses, the total responses you graph, are in a pretty narrow range annually from 2014 through 2018 for that 5-year span. Give or take 50 or 75 responses around 1,900. But at the same time, there's a fairly significant growth in calls generated by the new, more dense, like Rogers Way, Tri-Town Landing. And so for the 2 to be consistent, that means that the response to the rest of the town must have declined. Puzzles me.
Some of the response you see with the new growth, initially a lot of that is inspections. If you see the graphs on there, they do track the different types of calls. What you
Yep.
see is the emergency calls usually start off low and the inspections are high.
Yeah.
As the developments are fully built out, you'll see the inspections drop off. Usually you'll see some of the fire responses drop off because they've gotten the bugs worked out of the fire alarms, dust and smoke detectors, things like that. But what we see is with the multifamily developments, the emergency medical calls continue to rise.
Well, and that was kind of the puzzle with Rogers Way, is they seem to have a large component of EMS calls as well.
They've picked up substantially. The last building was completed in, I believe, December. And that they are fully built out now and
Yeah.
fully occupied. Those buildings, as they were completed, basically once the inspection was done, the people were moving in within a week, and they had a waiting list for each building. So we've started to see a call volume out of there.
Yep, and I guess the follow-on then is, if in fact, if they do keep generating calls at the rate they have been recently, does that mean that we've got a new sort of range instead of a new higher range? And then what is the consequence for you folks?
For us, we still see the increased EMS calls. When I look back at the runs over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, what you generally see is you'll see an increase. They seem to level off for a while. They'll increase again. And you'll see, like any other graph, some years, like last year was a little slower than the year before.
Yeah.
What this year's like, this year started off slow. This month's been very busy, which is traditionally our slowest month of the year.
And just for my own personal clarification here, you spent a lot of time talking about the new paramedic hires. Then in a subsequent chart, you said 2 to 3 more paramedics to get to 24/7 coverage, which is what we really, as a town,
Right.
want to go to.
Right.
Is that 2 or 3 more in addition to the ones we're hiring and training?
Right.
Okay.
The 5-year plan had called for a total staff of 9
Okay.
eventually.
Okay.
So, and that would put a paramedic on duty 24/7, and in best case scenario, you'd have a second medic on during the daytime
That's
in an
what I
admin
thought.
position,
Thanks a lot, Chief.
certainly.
And then I would just ask, in terms of clarification, I think is Rogers Way not an over 55 community?
It is not.
It is not?
No, it's a
Okay.
40B.
It's a 40B,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
For some reason, I thought that initially it was,
I don't believe so. That's the new building that would probably be going in down on Tri-Town. That last building,
Oh,
that
I'm
was going to
sorry,
be over 55.
okay.
Tri-Town is the only one that's not built out all the way. Emerald Place, Rogers Way, they're all completely built out now.
Okay. And then, all right, so one of the things when's the next contract up for the firefighter?
I believe they are done the end, June of 2020.
Okay, so I'm assuming at some point, one of the discussions is, does the town have a salary schedule for paramedics?
We have currently, yes, we do. There is a salary schedule for firefighter EMT and firefighter paramedic.
Are there currently anybody on the firefighter paramedic? No.
There are not.
Okay. Because they're not required to be paramedics.
The existing staff, a couple are advanced EMTs, but they are basics. The new people, like the first one would not probably be able to test until the beginning of 2020. He'll be done his schooling, probably his field time, somewhere at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. So somewhere in probably the first half of 2020, he'll be able to test, and he may be eligible once he gets his paramedic for that then.
So then basically what we're looking at is in 2024, by the time we come around to that we're working off a different salary schedule.
Eventually, you would be there.
That's
Yeah.
something that, okay.
Yep.
The other question that I had was going back to the EMS calls. Of the 900 and however many that were listed, are you just listing what we responded to, or are you listing within that a number that might have had to have been outsourced?
That would include all the calls. A handful of those might have been outsourced, and that we may have, both of our ambulances may have been tied up or not available. I don't have those broken out separately, but the number is low. There have been very few that we've had to outsource, at least as far as for the transport part of it. We still use other services for a paramedic right now. They intercept with us. So
But the 900 would also include the paramedic calls.
the 900 would include, they include all the transports that we do, that we respond on. They would also include motor vehicle accidents, any type of rescue situations, drownings, entrapments. They include well-being checks, that if we go because like a lifeline alarm went off. They include lift assists, that we go and, okay, the person's not hurt, but they need someone to help them up.
Okay.
So out of that 900, I don't have the number in front of me, about 70-something% of those result in transports.
Okay. And for the most part, we're able to handle those within the
Correct.
town?
Generally with the 2 ambulances. Yep.
Okay. And then how does that tie into, I guess my question goes to, in terms of fees, are you able to collect on your fees, or is that kind of a?
I don't have the number right in front of me right now. We do fairly well with the billing agency that we
Okay.
use. There's always some that, periodically we come back to the selectmen with uncollectibles that go back quite a ways.
Okay.
A lot of it's about approximately 64% Medicare, Medicaid in town, which is a different billing rate. That's a set rate versus like a private insurance. And that, which is one of the reasons why we could increase, as we go paramedic, we could increase our rates, but it's not enough to make it an enterprise type fund. It would offset our costs and that. And one of the things that, I've always heard is a concern of the impact on the elderly and that. Well, if we transport them, if they're Medicare, Medicaid, Mass Health, it's a set rate and that they're not paying what a private insurer would be paying. So.
George?
Yeah, Chief, I'm looking at the 5-year capital plan. Unless I'm missing it here, I don't see any replacements for new ambulances.
Not until, this year currently we have 1 ambulance to replace the 2008 unit. The next one would not be up until 2026, when it would be about 10 to 12 years old.
Okay.
And that's when the next ambulance would be up. If we get the new ambulance this year, that one would become our frontline truck and handle about 85% of the calls. The existing frontline truck would become the backup, and that would handle the other 15%. That's how we rotate them around.
So 2026?
2026 right now, if it's on there. And the next large apparatus would be 2028, I believe, as far as, that would be, the 2008 pumper would be 20 years old at that point.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Is the ladder truck on the 5-year plan or no?
It's on order. It's already passed.
For 4 months.
Yeah, it's scheduled, originally when ordered, would have been probably about July. Now I'm being told it's probably going to be about October, November. And that, just, the factory is behind due to a couple of issues.
I just didn't know if it changed with the years on this or not.
No,
Okay.
no, that's, it's ordered.
No, once it's approved, it's,
That's it.
Yeah, the order was placed last, beginning of September.
Okay.
okay, if there's no other questions, oh, I'm sorry,
I do just have a
Michelle.
quick one. On the paramedic training slide, you make reference to a license?
Yes, it'd be right now, we're licensed to operate at the advanced EMT level. To go paramedic, there's a process we have to go through the state to increase our licensing level to provide paramedic care, because now they would actually be providing, different forms of medication and things like that. So there's a process that we have to go through with that. There's not a huge increase on that because we're technically already running an advanced life support license at the advanced level, but the state treats that similar to cost-wise to a paramedic license. The bigger increase there when it finally happened would probably be a medical direction fee. We have to work through a physician's group that we have to operate under a doctor's license to do that. We currently pay about $5,000 for that. I would anticipate when we finally do it, that would go up.
That would go up?
Yeah.
Is there any financial benefit to having that license? More eligible for a grant or anything like that?
Not in that respect. I mean, we would have to have it to operate at the paramedic level. When we operate at that level, right now, we're paying out approximately $60,000 a year to other services for their paramedic. We would keep that money, plus, most of this was in my last year's presentation.
Yeah, I
but
know. I'm a newbie.
Without going through all the numbers, we would see more of the revenue stay here. There are a few more calls that right now would probably go without a paramedic just because they're not available or we can't intercept that our people would be able to treat more quickly. Again, never going to completely pay for itself, but it would offset our cost of having the staff, not only for the ambulance, but also to have the fire staff in the event of another emergency.
Thank you.
Questions from the public?
Thanks, Chief. Again, congratulations on a great presentation. I have two questions, if I can remember both of them. The first one is that if we do not increase by one more firefighter, paramedic this year, that puts us back on the schedule that we were originally on previous to 2019. Okay, thank you. The other question is if we were to put that position in place this year, which puts us over the target budget, how does that affect overtime? First of all, if we do put it in, second of all, if we don't put it in, is there a trade-off?
Figure about another 14,000 that was included in the above target number.
Okay, so we exacerbate the overtime again.
We would have to cover that person's basic earned time off.
Right.
That's what
Okay.
that's based on.
Thank you. The other comment I'd just like to make, and you just mentioned the possible savings from outsourcing the paramedic calls. Rough numbers, it looks like to me that it's going to cost us $60,000 to $70,000 in training cost and or covering of shifts to train a paramedic, and we really are only guaranteed roughly a year or a little bit under after their training is done that they have to stay.
They have to, it's a 3-year cycle that they would have to.
3 years after their certification or including?
Scaling after their certification. If they left within the first year, they would have to pay it all back, and then it scales down.
Okay. I was looking at it as the training period was included in that 3 years, which would give us a very small window. Thank you very much.
And one thing I would add out of that is that the two people that we hired have been both call firefighters here in the community for some time. I would not, they're dedicated to the community. That's one of my fears of hiring too far out. You can always find somebody, but they don't have the skin in the game to the community. And it's one of the things that I've sort of looked at when we've hired some of these people, that they're people, they're from town, and I think they'll stay here because they have some commitment to the community. So. Watch out for the wires.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. First, I want to thank and really
congratulate the chief on the great job he did getting the staffing up and running for the 24/7. I mean, I think it was less than a couple months after town meeting, which is phenomenal. So congratulations on that, and thank you. Just on the paramedic, which is a big thing, the training, when I hear these numbers, the first thing I want to confirm, because I think I confused, the 21,000 for the outside training EMS, that's in the budget, right?
Right now, the one we're paying, I'm paying it out of the budget.
Okay.
It is not budgeted, but I am paying it out of the budget.
But, okay.
We've had many a discussion with
Okay.
Ms. Lemieux and I
So-
over that.
so
It was
I'm-
not budgeted, but we're making it work right now.
But it's in the FY20 budget.
I believe in her updated assessment.
Yes, it's in
Yeah, 'cause
FY20.
it sounded like it might not be, and I want to make sure.
We kind of go back and forth on some of the
Yeah.
numbers there a little bit.
Okay, because I just looked it up online, and I
Yes.
thought I saw it, but,
Yes.
so it's not twice that then?
No,
Okay, good.
no, whether it's in
Okay.
the budget or above,
It's in.
that's the amount.
Good, yeah, and we got it coming, so we need the training.
Yeah.
But it really raises an important question. I think the chief does a great job on looking at the numbers and the alternatives. Is what the cost is for us to hire EMSs and then train them up. It sounds like it's huge, and I don't know what the total number is when you take into account the costs of training, the overtimes, the missing, and it concerns me, because not only do I have this uneasy feeling that it costs a lot more to bring in an EMS and train them up, it also takes time, takes years, so we don't have that capability. So I think we really need to do a deep dive on what is the real total cost of bringing a EMS up to a paramedic versus just increasing our rates, maybe, because I know they're in great demand. But maybe we got to be more competitive, and maybe we're being, penny wise and pound foolish here, and spending twice as much as to train somebody up as we could maybe to go hire somebody right out of the gate.
With our current scale, it would have been about $5,000 more a person to hire a paramedic at the entry level versus a basic.
But that wasn't enough, it sounded like.
Correct.
So and it's not much when you
It's a-
compare
it's
to
very-
$20,000 to train them up.
Competitive market right
Right.
now for paramedics.
So I think we need to look at the rate scales and see if we can't bring those up to level. Because the other problem we'll have is we'll go spend all this money training, and then they'll be at a salary level that the towns around us will come grab them. So, I think we need to take a hard look, not only, trying to hire paramedics instead of EMSs, but that, look at the total cost and what the salary ranges are. Because, we got to be competitive, and I have this feeling that this is a crazy way to go. Thank you.
Anything else for the chief?
I have another.
George?
So Chief, to Mr. Luck's comments, the salary for a parametric to go out and hire one in the open market, are you restricted by the contract that runs out in?
We have the pay scale, it's in the contract. A paramedic is approximately 10% over a base firefighter. In terms of numbers from step to step, it's about a $5,000 difference. But the pay scales that are out there are still significantly more than ours. At least some are close, some are way further. But a guy with a firefighting certificate and a paramedic certificate can kind of decide where he wants to go, because they're in demand.
Okay. So those new rates will need to be reviewed when 2020 comes around?
Something to consider.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the reasons I asked the question about when the next contracts were up, because I would assume it would be in this one or the next one to cover the...
Partway through. I believe it's the end of June of 2020,
Okay.
so.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, then we'll cut you loose. Thank you very much, Chief. It was an excellent
Thank you.
presentation, very informative. And Chief Marino, are you going to need some setup time? Just, okay, we'll give you a few minutes to set up. And I'll try to find the agenda. I think that we do not have minutes available tonight. I believe we will have minutes available next week to cover the last two meetings.
Yep.
I will give, the one committee update that I do have was that the Charter Review Committee was supposed to have its public hearing last night. I guess there was concern with turning people out after that meeting ended, not knowing whether or not they'd be going out into snow. So that meeting was canceled and will now be held next Wednesday night at 7:30 PM in this room.
Good.
So,
Thanks.
anybody interested in attending the Charter Review Committee public hearing is more than welcome to attend that night. I don't chair that meeting, so I'm not promising food. So this is a sign that everybody's getting more practiced at this, that the setup takes so much less time than it has in the past. Chief, we're ready when you are.
Okay. All right, I guess more so for the people at home, let me just introduce the police department. Police department's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The front desk at the Public Safety Building is open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The police department employs 16 full-time police officers, 11 reserve intermittent police officers, a public safety coordinator, and a desk officer. The organization is comprised of 3 divisions, as you can see on the chart: administrative operations and patrol, and the subdivisions include criminal investigations, traffic control / canine, community outreach, and school resource, which is a multitask job at the present time. We also have animal control under the auspices of the police department. Office hours for the chief are 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. The lieutenant and public safety coordinator on duty Monday through Friday between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. The animal control officer is on call for 24 hours, on an on-call basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Last year, in the year 2018, not to be confused with the fiscal year, but and I just want to point out that when I do statistics, it's all by year, not by fiscal year. It's by calendar year. In the year 2018, police responded to 1,983 calls for service, which was a 13.7% increase over last year. 315 motor vehicle accidents, investigated 1,070 incidents, 47 field interview reports, wrote 1,889 motor vehicle citations, and arrested 144 people, summoned 207, and placed 8 people in protective custody. The K-9 officer was deployed 27 times in the first half was deployed 27 times. In the first half of 2017, staff assignments, that's a mistake. 2018 staff assignments had to be increased 75 times to effectively meet service demands. Some of the budget challenges, I'll tell you one budget challenge is trying to say this every year, using different words the same way.
That's okay, just talk to Michelle, she's new, so just talk to Michelle.
That's the
She'll
challenge.
appreciate it.
In other words, basically, I can cut and paste everything and give it to you and just change the figures. And I only have to do that one more year, by the way, because I'll be 65 next year, and you'll be casting me aside. So anyways, the biggest challenge is that our budget is flexible. It has to be flexible. Crime's unpredictable. It makes the police budget a moving target.
Major crime can equate to an enormous amount of overtime, and we see that time and time again. An environmental issue such as a microburst or a hurricane or a blizzard, which you cannot predict on an annual basis, can require the police department to deploy a large contingency of officers to respond to an inordinate amount of service calls, invariably causing the budget to hemorrhage. Calls for service which continue to rise are affected by not only growth in our community, but the surrounding communities as well, and I just want to emphasize that. We do not deal with just things that happen in Lunenburg. We have, it's a transient society, so we deal with incidents caused by people other than residents of Lunenburg. It's just a fact of life. Calls for service will always be affected by not only growth in our community, but the surrounding community as well, on the same lines. If a community next to us grows, it affects our calls for service. Well, here's a great example. There's going to be a retail marijuana facility at the Lunenburg town line. I mean, literally on the town line, on the Fitchburg town line, coming soon. That'll affect our calls for service. There's no question in my mind. And I don't mean just because of what it is, but any business, no matter how small, can affect our calls for services, whether it's in Lunenburg or sometimes in another community surrounding us. Traffic is another a problem, and it will continue to increase and have a direct effect on the amount of traffic accidents the police have to investigate and all kinds of other crime associated with automobiles. Environmental factors play a role, and I think I already alluded to that, particularly in the motor vehicle accident picture, because we have to deal with days when it's ice and snow and rain and so on and so forth, which increases our accident picture. Incidents and arrests, the amounts of incident arrests affected by social and economic factors. So very unpredictable again. But no matter what, we have to be prepared. That's our mantra. There's this. I always say this. There's times when you can come in the building and it's quiet. It may be quiet for several hours, and all of a sudden, the expletive hits the fan, and we're running, and we need everybody we can. Sometimes we can never predict that, so we have to be prepared for anything. The lockup account is a moving target that varies annually with the number of custodial arrests. You're going to notice when we look at this, after we get through the budget portion of this presentation, that this year our arrests began to decline, and so did our offense numbers. And I'll explain that later, what an offense number means, but that's a trend right now, and that happens. But it will spike. As a matter of fact, we're at 61 arrests already this year. That's like one a day. So we're looking at probably an increase again this year. Those are trends. As a matter of fact, I'm going to allude to this later on in this presentation, that the crime in Massachusetts has also trended downwards. We'll talk about that in a little while. But it'll go back up. Salaries, of course, fluctuate with contractual wage increases, which we're going to see again next year because the contract's up in July, and they're going to begin negotiating a new contract very shortly here. Wage increases, as I just alluded to, changing training mandates. It seems like every year there's a training mandate. Last year there was a mandate that said all officers have to be trained 40 hours minimum in-service training annually, and that includes our reserves, which it never included before. It wasn't a mandate. It is a mandate now. Calls for service affect many of the line items, which you'll see here, including overtime, gas consumption, and vehicle maintenance issues. Vehicle maintenance is going to continue to rise. Fleet vehicles are embedded with a lot of technology requiring significant investments in diagnostic equipment to repair malfunctions. Vehicles are equipped with advanced driver assistance systems, collision avoidance, surround view, lane departure warning systems, pedestrian protection, blind spot monitoring, which is costly in terms of repair in some cases. But I think the payoff is the liability. These vehicles are becoming much, much more safe for our officers to drive, and of course, we drive upwards of 50,000 miles per car per year. So that's important to us, and it should be important to the town because, you know, from a liability standpoint, it's probably going to save the town some money in the long run. It's vehicle maintenance affected by changing gasoline prices, of course, and increased costs for replacement parts and tires. Tires have gone up tremendously over the last several years, and as I just said, escalating labor rates. Also, changes in manufacturing requirements. I mean, now the cars are required to have synthetic oil, which costs more money. Requirements like that drive up the cost of preventive maintenance, and preventive maintenance is obviously important to us. It keeps the cars running much longer, and that's our goal, is to try to keep them a little longer. Staffing will remain a number one priority, and let me talk about that a little bit. We'll look at the budget. I've asked for a couple above target requests. The target request came in at 2.181,515.95. We're asking to go above that target by $44,186.59. I'm going to talk about why that is shortly. But staffing is going to remain a number one priority for us. And I'm sure that, as I just said, that'll transcend my tenure as a police chief. For a couple of reasons. The police department, as you know, and I know this is an old story to some of you that have been on this board for a while, it didn't grow in a significant way for over 20 years, leaving the current leadership a challenge of making up for lost time. And I mean that leadership, that's all of us. I include everybody there. The town will continue to grow. It's not going to stop growing. Calls for service will continue to rise, and traffic will continue to increase, which will cause the workload to grow. And I didn't do a workload analysis here, but some of you that have been here for a few years have seen that I've done a workload analysis, the one that Michigan State University concocted, and it showed that we should have 26 or around 26 officers, full-time officers. So I'd like to say, this came up. In fact, a member of your board asked me, well, what, is it urgent? I mean, you're only asking for one guy a year, because we, as you know, we submitted a 10-year hiring plan. So we're asking for one person over the next 10 years. I just thought that was realistic. A member of your board said, well, if you need, you showed that you need the need. Well, what about the urgency? Well, yeah, of course it's, we'd love to have 26 officers now. We're just trying to be realistic. So if somebody asks that question, that's got to be the way to answer it. I can't, even as a taxpayer, we obviously have to be responsible. Yeah, it would be great to spend $1 million right now. We just don't have it. So I'm trying to be realistic and pushing it out over 10 years. We have other ways to deal with that, and I'll talk a little bit about that more as we get into the presentation. And we've talked about it before, how we deal with our lack of staffing to try to make up for those times when urgency is a factor. So over time, though, that's an important thing, to at least over time to continue to catch up and make us more effective, because we have to be effective. Public depends on it. They don't want police that aren't effective. It's bad all the way around. It just creates a vicious cycle, and after a while, they lose confidence in us, and then they, of course, they complain about us, and then you hear about it, and probably wondering why and wanting answers and so on and so forth. So I don't want that to happen. Training is an issue as well, and you probably won't see this in this budget, but I anticipate by next year my training budget's going to have to grow again, and I just want to bring that up this year in preparation. There's going to be some more mandates that I'm going to talk about during the year. That's probably going to force my training budget to move up a little bit. I don't think in a significant way, but it bears at least having conversations about it during the year. I'm just anticipating that. I don't believe we had to move it up much this year. Obviously, if there's a pay increase, a contractual pay increase, that's going to affect it as well. But there's also other mandates that I'm going to discuss during the year that will probably have not a significant effect, but it will have an effect on my training budget. So I just want to look at this slide here. This is just a breakdown of the budget. I just kind of generalized all of the line items without going, kind of broke them all down. So the salary, the police salary portion, I'm looking for a $2,066 increase, and that's in the investigations and field services account. So, yeah, if you want to move that up. So, what, the question is, well, what is investigations and field services? What that is, and just let me explain it. I know you asked this question to the fire chief. I'm going to explain it because we do something similar. All of our overtime line item that you see, and we'll back this up after so you can see it again, only covers vacation and personal days and sick days. And sick days are calculated, there's a formula that we use to calculate how many sick days we're going to anticipate that we're going to have to cover. Oftentimes we're way off on that. If somebody gets injured off duty and it's an acceptable use of sick time, even though they get 15 a year, you might have an officer like me, I got upwards of 4,000 sick hours. So say something serious happened and I took off 2 months, that has an adverse effect on my overtime budget because we might budget for 10 sick days, so per officer. The IFS account, the Investigation and Field Services account, that's investigations. Has nothing to do with sick time or personal time or anything. That's when I got to keep the detective over to investigate a crime that goes beyond the 8-hour period. That's when an officer gets an accident call at 2:45, and I got to keep him on there because I need extra bodies. And plus, he's got to come back and finish the report. So he may put in for an hour or two of overtime. By the time he gets done cleaning up the accident, investigating, coming back and doing the report. That happens with arrests quite frequently. An arrest might come right towards the end of the shift. The officer's held in the booking room. He has to complete the arrest report because it's required for the court officer to present it to the prosecutor the next morning. So he may be held over to do that report. And sometimes, most of the time in those cases, it's an hour or two. There's a whole list, and Amanda's got it right up on the screen in front of us. There's a list of the reasons. What I do is I keep track. When they make out an overtime shift on an IFS account, they'll put a description of why they had to stay over, and that's what this is. It's a list that I've done this for the last 7 years. I comprise a list to show you what we use that account for, and this is a list of it. And if I could see that well, I could read some of it to you. But anyways, booking is, I think I already alluded to that. There's the community outreach person that goes to these opiate meetings and so forth because he's required to, and that's always at night. His hours are, he's a school resource officer too, so he has to work during the day. So at night I'll pay him to go to these meetings. That comes out of investigations and field services because he's in the investigative unit. I don't know, there's a bunch of, I'm sorry? Yeah, canine calls are included in that. If the canine isn't on duty and we have to call him in to go out to something, he'll get paid out of the IFS account. Domestic violence calls sometimes require a lot of time, and it always pulls people over their shift. And it's not like I'm dealing with a domestic violence call. I can't just say, okay, you go home. I'm going to have another officer deal with this victim. You can't do that. You got to stay with the victim. So that requires overtime sometimes. And again, what I do is I try to comprise, or I don't try, but I do comprise a list of reasons why they stay over. So that's the IFS account. And what we anticipate that's going to go up this year for a couple of reasons. And typically what happens is we know our calls for service are going to go up, so that's going to increase this account. Mm-hmm. other reasons are when it calls for service go up, obviously, one of the other reasons is the accident picture seems to be going up, and the reason for that is, if you look at, and you'll see that later, I got a slide in there showing the increase in our accident picture, and that's for no other reason than our traffic volume has increased dramatically. So I know that's going to affect our IFS account in not, it's not a real significant way, as I'm not asking for $10,000 more, but I know it's going to go up, and I need to cover that. Otherwise, I'm coming back asking for money. I know that's going to happen. So that's the reason that we're asking for an increase in that account. I think what's going to happen too down the road, but that'll be taken care of in another manner, is if there's a contract increase, a pay increase coming with this coming contract, that'll also affect the overtime rate, and it'll affect the IFS account. But this request is strictly to respond to our increase in calls for service and our increased accident picture, which I know that won't go down. And it's not for lack of enforcement. I mean, it's more of a function of the traffic volume. It's increased, and it keeps increasing every year in somewhat of a dramatic fashion. And we've been able to keep track of some of that with that new technology. That trailer we bought a couple of years ago has the technology to give us a computer readout as the, the amount of traffic on certain roads. And we're quite surprised at the traffic counts on even some of the back roads in town have increased quite a bit. So anyways, as you can see, I threw in a slide to show you what our calls for service looks like over that 10-year period. And you can see there was a dip there around 2016, but it continually rises, and I don't think it'll ever really go down. You can see it starts way down here, it ends up here, but there are dips, and we've seen that, just like we've seen dips in the arrest amounts and incident amounts. Again, motor vehicle accidents, keep rising, and they're going to continue to rise, I guarantee you, because our vehicle volume will continue to increase. Incidents over the 10-year period steadily went up, and we're seeing a dip in them right now, but I guarantee you that'll begin to rise soon. That's a trend, and again, I'll begin into that shortly, throughout the entire state. Again, there's our arrest rate. Really spiked one year and then started to go down, and it's going to start. It went down a little bit again this year, but it'll start going up over the next several years. That's my prediction, based on experience. I know I continue to talk about this, and I know we have a plan and so on and so forth, but I think it always bears repeating. One of my number one goals is increasing the staffing levels. I see that there's another officer salary put in my budget this year. I'm just trying to emphasize how important that is to maintain that level. I, again, added a cost breakdown. I do this every year for you to show you what it costs to add another officer. Try to be as thorough as I can in terms of trying to figure out exactly what that officer is going to cost for the year. And again this year, of course, I didn't get as much response as I have in the last year. Trying to get people to call you back now. They're probably busier than I am. But I did get a pretty good sample, and using all the same communities. I didn't want to venture away from that. But you can see Lunenburg's the dark blue. We always are above all of these other communities, same demographic, similar community in as much as they have anchor stores like we have, and so on and so forth. That's how I picked them, so that I get, similar sample. One of them is, I don't know if you've ever been there. Well, Acushnet's surrounded by New Bedford Fall River area. That's another thing. I wanted to make sure there was cities around the town, bordering the town just like us. Norwell, if you haven't been to Norwell, you wouldn't think, it seems like there's a lot of commercial growth and everything in there. However, their numbers are much lower than ours, which I find rather curious. All right, next one. Here's a study done by Council for Home Safety and Security, safest cities in Massachusetts. Now, this study was the one that they did that proved that Massachusetts, the crime rate in Massachusetts is one of the lowest in the country. It's a pretty good, safe state to live in. There was 163 cities and towns participated in this. The data came from the federal crime stats. Believe it or not, and I was kind of shocked myself, this has nothing, I hate to admit this because it makes it look like we're not doing our job, but our crime rate's worse than Fitchburg's, according to this. But the reason it looks like that is because they use this formula that factors in how many police versus what your crime rate is. And, it's a term called police adequacy. So basically what this study's about is, do you have enough police? Is it an adequate police department? Otherwise, they're gonna move you down on that list, and that's what happened to us. We don't have enough police is what they're saying, versus what we have for crime. We can't deal with it. That's what that means. So it doesn't mean that it's not a safe place to live, because it really is. However, it ranks us below Fitchburg, which would really disturb me.
And Worcester.
And Worcester, yeah. So, but it's all about police adequacy. That's what this study is, not to be confused. Again, I talked about this before, 40-hour mandate now requires the part-time police to go through 40 hours of in-service training every year, and that doesn't include, we have to qualify them on firearms every year, and then every other year is CPR and first aid. That happens every year anyway. They have to get paid for that. So these are just some of this year's requirements, some of the classes that were required. You can go to the next one if you want. Let me just talk a little bit about professional development too while we're on that slide, or we were on that slide, the training slide. There's numerous other training that they don't have to have, but obviously, to maintain a professional level, we send them to other schools, and some of the things we do are arson investigation, interview and interrogation, narcotics enforcement, roadside impaired driving, which is right now is a big one because of the whole marijuana issue, really coming into play. Supervision classes, crime scene, motor vehicle crash investigation, instructor development, field training, and so on and so forth. And that's to maintain professional standards. And I'm going to go into that issue in a minute too. I just want to segue into that. But before I do that, let me talk about the desk watch coverage. Because again, if we go back to the budget, you'll see that we're asking over and above the target figure, we're asking to cover the desk again this year on the weekends. We do not cover the desk on the weekends. We only cover Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And what we'd like to do is cover Saturday and Sunday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Otherwise, when you go to the police station, it's dark. So if you're looking for service, you got to pick up the phone, you got to call dispatch down in Devon's. They have to call on the radio and have a car meet you at the police station. A little convoluted when you're in a situation. And I always use this example of this poor guy's out in the car with his father's having a heart attack, and that's what people do. They drive to the police station instead of the hospital. And he doesn't know what to do, first of all. You can see him. This is all on video. I saved the video. He doesn't know what to do. Finally, he figures out, I got to pick up this phone. He picks up the phone. Fortunately, an officer was coming through the back door and heard something out front. He just by chance. And so he went out to see what was going on, and this guy's out there and he's having a heart attack. So he ran back in, this is all on video, grabbed the emergency kit, called, is on his radio, you can see him on his radio calling the fire department, the EMTs, and they saved the guy. But, that can happen. And we've had people come in the lobby on numerous occasions over the years that I've been there with medical issues, not necessarily heart attacks, although I've seen it. I had another case where it's during daytime, and I happened to be there, and there was a horn beeping outside, and there was an elderly woman in her car, and she was sick, and she couldn't come to the door. We had to call the ambulance. She couldn't get out of her car. She was too sick. So we called the ambulance, and I picked up. So, you know, I'm just trying to make, again, the police department more effective. I don't want somebody coming to the police department, they don't have access to us on the weekends because there's nobody in the police station, because we're out on patrol. We don't sit in the police station unless we're doing a report or something. And it happened to be there, and the door's locked. They locked the front door on Saturday and Sunday. So I asked for money in my budget to try to cover some of that. And even if it was funded, though, I can tell you that this is something we have to negotiate with the union to be able to do, because we don't do it on an overtime basis. The Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, is a part-time officer. We negotiated that with the union to use part-time police to cover those. It saves money. We intend on asking the union to allow us to do the same thing on the weekend, so that we can save some money and not pay overtime for it. And again, when they're there on Saturday and Sunday from 7 to 7, we don't have to pay for prisoner watch, because that's one of their functions. They watch prisoners while they're acting as the desk officer. So we save a little money there. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to pay for the whole weekend coverage, because it won't. But it does save us from calling somebody in on overtime to watch a prisoner on the weekends. Oh yeah, professional standards, I was talking about that with training. I'm in the process of trying to get us accredited. We're in self-assessment. My goal has been to try to get this done before I leave. I'd like to get it done by next fall. That's my goal. It hasn't been easy because I just don't have the administrative staff, but we are working currently on it. It's in process. And like I said, I'm hoping to get it done by next fall, but I'll get it done before I leave. That's my ultimate goal next year. And we're really, we have a lot done. It's really in advanced stages of the process. So I anticipate that's going to happen soon. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to defer to Amanda for this slide, because she knows so much more about it, because it has to do with payroll and detailed billing and so on and so forth.
Hi. I know most of you, but I haven't met you before. I'm Amanda. I'm the public safety coordinator at the police station. I handle a lot of the administrative duties there at the station. So our fifth goal here in our budget this year is to implement a detail and overtime software. This is something that we've actually already started this year. We were able to get a contract with this software company on a prorated basis, and we found the money in our budget out of our equipment maintenance line. We are looking for an above-target request of $3,720 moving forward. This would be an annual fee. It is a per-officer fee at $120, per user, not per officer, per user. And it's something that will help automate the department. On this slide here, I have a snapshot of what just the system looks like. It's called Police DTS. It's a system the owner and the operator is actually a Lunenburg resident. It's widely used throughout the state. Fitchburg's been using it for many, many years with much success. It's a secure cloud-based system. So when we first started meeting with this, we were meeting with our IT people, and we had a couple different companies come in. One of IT's biggest concerns was having it be cloud-based so it wouldn't put any more burden on our servers. So this system is fully cloud-based. It does three major things. It will manage our details, our overtime disbursement, and also our scheduling and attendance. So right now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with how details work, but right now, if a vendor needs a police officer in the street, so say Unitil is going to replace a pole, they call into dispatch. Dispatch then faxes that request down to us, and if someone is on the desk, the desk officer will take care of it. If there's no one on the desk, someone from patrol has to come in to take care of it. We have a call list that is a manually done process. The person that takes the call has to come in and call every single person on our list based on their contract until someone accepts the shift. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. And then on the back end, it has to be updated bi-weekly so that the hours reflect the contract. Then, when the person goes on the detail, we have this is a copy of our old slip. It's a 3-page carbon copy paper. The vendor gets a copy, and then the 2 back copies come back to the office, and I handle this for invoicing and also for payroll. It's a really cumbersome, long process. This new system here, instead of having the calls, someone will still have to put it into the system, but it can also happen on their smartphones. So if a request comes in for a detail, actually also for an overtime shift, they can just stop what they're doing. They don't have to go back to the station. They can input it in a simple input form. It takes like 30 seconds to put it in, and it goes out to all of our officers. They can select their preferences, whether they want an email, a phone call, a push notification through the app, or a text message, and they can select their preferences, and it's all automated, and it's done really, really quickly. This has been built out to fit with our department policies and procedures, as well as the contract, so that it will award the person based on their hours. It's really similar for overtime shifts or any other shifts that we've talked about, the chief talked about here earlier. It will do that same award-based system, and it also will automate managing their hours. The third part of it is scheduling and leave requests. That's another process that's done manually right now. So a big goal of this will be to streamline our administrative overhead. It'll free up some time for the officers. It's a little bit quicker, and also some time in the office on my end. I can help more with the accreditation process, which moving forward, it doesn't just, once you become accredited, it doesn't just stop. You have to redo it every 3 years, and there are certain mandates within our process that you have to continue to do. So it'll free up me to have a little bit more time to work on some other projects. It also, moving forward, depending on how this goes, there is a function for payroll that we can export directly into Munis. So that's something that could help with the payroll moving forward. So looking forward to having this new process. Like I said, we do have this already. We haven't implemented it for the officers yet. We have purchased it out of our equipment and maintenance, but we're looking for this as an above target request so that it doesn't impact our equipment and maintenance budget moving forward, because that money is utilized for a multitude of other things like QuickClot or other medical supplies or anything else that isn't covered, like office supplies are covered separately, but anything else in our budget, we would like this to be an additional request moving forward.
So essentially, this does 2 things. It keeps my guys on the road instead of in the station for 2 hours trying to fill overtime and details. And it streamlines the payroll process, which I think we have probably one of the most complicated payroll processes in town. So those are the 3 items that we're asking for over and above the target. The IFS account, the payroll software, and then, of course, the weekend coverage for the desk. Oh, yeah,
I
certainly.
just wanted to say, I did put in your packets a copy of an example invoice. It's something that I didn't touch on when I was talking.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
Sorry, I was
Okay, no, that's
moving
fine.
so fast. That is a copy of an invoice and also a slip. Some vendors require a slip, which right now we've had this paper slip, and we give them. Now the slips, the officers, when they go to those assignments, can check in on their phones and sign in there. So when I create the invoice just by clicking a button, instead of manually copying all of these and creating an Excel spreadsheet, I can just select the vendor in the system, it manually creates an invoice, and I can attach those slips that the officers have assigned. So that's why I provided an example for you. So it's really professional looking, and it is easy to track. So when the money comes in, because there's a lot of money with details that comes in and out of our account, I can, provide the town accountant with an updated amount of, who owes us money. I can add administrative fees if they go over 30 days, things like that, so we can track where we're at. It should make that process a lot easier.
Excellent.
Okay, I'll try to wrap this up real quick here, but I just want to talk a little bit about capital. We're trying to replace 2 cars this year, as you know. I think already you've looked at the capital plan. The additional staffing level has caused us to, driven the need for another car in our lineup. My car's 9 years old. going on 10, so I'm looking to replace that as well before I leave. I like to leave with, leave something good behind. It's, it's time. The things I get concerned about when they get to be around 10 years old is we just junk one that's got a rotten frame and it's become unsafe. I don't think that that's the case in my car. I've garaged it since I've had it for the last 7 or 8 years. But it is, it is getting old, and I think it's time to get rid of it. I can always keep it as a spare, because we use those cars to send the people back and forth to training, because then we don't have to pay them mileage, which can be expensive. It's cheaper to put gas in them and let them use those older cars, as long as they're safe to go back and forth. And that's what we've been doing with the older cars, as well as using them on patrol, some of the patrol cars that we've kept patrol. Anyways, one of them will be a fully equipped patrol level marked vehicle, and the other one's an unmarked vehicle, which doesn't have all the equipment the patrol cars have. I'm also asking for 8 patrol rifles and 2 shotguns, and 6 are replacements, and 2 patrol rifles and 2 shotguns are additional because our fleet has grown since the shotguns and rifles are 10 years old. So since that time, our fleet's grown. We have we'll have 2 cars that aren't equipped, and they should be equipped, particularly this one that we're adding, because it's a frontline patrol vehicle. So that's why we're asking for an additional couple of rifles and shotguns. The other ones are replacements because they're 10 years old. And after 10 years old, we're advised to turn them in because of the reliability factor. We're taking a chance that they're reliable. I mean, they seem to work well, but after 10 years of kicking around inside of a car and being used every year, and sometimes twice a year to qualify on, it's time that they get replaced, and that's why we're asking for 2 new ones. All right, so other than that, I think 2 issues are going to come up, and one's already come up, and we've already begun conversations about it, and that's the fuel. Currently in the process of doing a survey and kind of a cost analysis on fuel. So I've got a lot of data coming in. I plan on talking about that in the next couple of weeks, at some point with you, through the town manager. Vehicle maintenance is also an issue that I'm working on right now in terms of cost analysis and access. That's going to be my 2 issues with both of them. Access to service, access to fuel, and cost. And those are going to come up soon. So, at any rate, thank you for listening to me again this year. You only have to put up with me for another year and considering any of my requests. Unfortunately, enforcing the law comes with a price, sometimes more than you probably think, or more than you want to hear about, So thank you again for listening to me.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. It's informative as always, and it was nice to hear from Amanda as well. And I just ask if anyone has any questions for the chief or Amanda. Hannah,
I do.
You do.
How well do you feel that having dispatch in Neshoba is compared to having it in town? Like, you're looking for more weekend coverage for the front desk. So I imagine that also means that dispatch would be open for you guys during that weekend time, right?
Do you want my public version of this, or?
Yeah, I do.
He wanted to know if you wanted his private version of this thing.
Unvarnished.
Has nothing to do with anybody that works there or the operation. I was never in favor of it. I was very vocal about that, in opposition of it when it all happened. I think there's some challenges with it.
Okay. I wasn't in town when that happened, so I don't really know the back history of it. I'm just wondering if it's something that would be more positive to bring it back into town, or if it's just something that it would be better not to.
We all want to, I hear a lot of this, I hear a lot of outsourcing everything. Well, outsourcing to me is not the answer to anything in our business in public safety. I don't think so in a lot of areas in municipal government. That's just my opinion, though. I'm opposed to it. And in public safety, we have to have access and control over a lot of things because of the nature of what we do. You know, that fuel thing, you probably heard, or maybe you weren't here, but, you know, we have to have access to fuel at 24/7 under any conditions. Do you think that's going to happen at the local gas station that's 6 miles away in a snowstorm when possibly there's no electricity? You know, we have pumps with a backup generator because that's why we have it, because we're a public safety agency. We got to keep plow trucks, police cars, fire trucks going. You know, so same thing with dispatch. It was nice having access and control over that. It's right in our building, you know, but it's not happening anymore. And I'm telling you, I'm opposed to it. And I say that all the time. It has nothing to do with the operation down there. It has nothing to do with the people that run it or the people that work there. And that's not the point. I don't think it's a great idea. You know, it's the state wanted to cut the PSAPs down. You know, they can't, it's very hard to fund 351 PSAPs. I get it. It's expensive. You know, to me, there's no, you know, this is a cop talking, but, you know, someday, you know, down the road, hopefully you'll agree with me that there's no trade-off when it comes to public safety issues. You know, there just is none. You know, unfortunately, you know, we all have to be responsible. I get that too, fiscally responsible. But I'm opposed to it, and you can see what's happened. I was opposed to it then. That's why I pushed to have, we needed some coverage in the station. If I had to get up every 5 minutes and answer the door, and you see in that narrative, if you read that narrative, you see how many times people walk through the door. And well, that's not really an accurate count, you know. You think for a minute the dispatch has time to write down. That's what they do, you know. The desk officer hand writes every time somebody calls on the phone. She has to write down on a log that somebody called and who called and when and what time. And then we rely on people who walk in the door to sign in. They don't all sign in, and she doesn't have time to keep track of that. So that number may not be accurate. As a matter of fact, I ran the key card thing on the door. You know, we can tell how many people came through the door. We just, you know, I mean, I could take, like, a man that comes through the front door every morning, so I'd have to deduct so many days. But it was way off. It was like 7,000 people walked through the door. You know, and the other thing is I don't know how many the same people walk in and out of the door, so I don't want to use that. So I use that log that we can count those every 6 months to see how many people. It's ridiculous. So if I had to get up every time, or Amanda had to get up, we never get anything done. It's hard to get things done as it is. There's too many distractions. You know, with the dispatches, when they're in the building, that was great. They're there. They're watching prison. You know, they could potentially watch prisoners if they were cops. Actually, they didn't in those days. I take that back. They didn't watch prisoners. But they answered the door. They dispatched calls from the people who came in the lobby to complain. They were there 24/7. You had access to them. You know. So that's going to be my new buzzword, access, in the next several months.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the history of it predates me a little bit. I think basically the move to it happened the year before I came on the committee, or the year of, and my understanding was that it was related to one of those unfunded mandate type things where you were going to be required to have more than one person.
That's right.
So basically, you would always have to have two people on as dispatchers, and so that was going to create, that was why they went to the regional.
It would double the amount. You're right.
Yeah.
No, that's what was happening. That's part of what drove it. So EMD, there's a thing, that EMD system requires that the mandate was they have to have two dispatchers on at all times. Because if you answer the phone, you got to start doing CPR. You can't drop what you're doing when somebody's falling down in the lobby or something, or, whatever they're doing. So you have to have two dispatchers on. That's what drove it. So I get that. I get it gets expensive. Look at it. Look at the price now, though. And that's in my budget, by the way, which it never used to be. So if you saw my budget skyrocket, it's because that budget's one of my line items. So for the Neshoba. So, yeah, it's expensive. Nothing's cheap anymore, right?
Any other questions?
Yep, I just have a couple for the chief.
No.
You, so in your earlier part of your presentation, you mentioned how the incidents and the arrests are currently are trending down in
Yep.
town and the state. Would you attribute that to a strong economy? What-
Yeah, the economy has a lot to do with it. That's what we've always found in the past, that social and economic changes affect the crime rate. And right now, the economy's in pretty good shape. So that typically, everything goes down, and that's what we're seeing. And we knew that would happen. You know, it really has, you know, some people like to say, well, it depends on the administration in Washington. Well, it doesn't really. It's really, well, it depends on them in as much as if the economy's strong. Like during the Clinton administration, we had a really strong economy. And if you look back then, crime rate was pretty decent then, you know. It started to go down a little bit. And plus, he introduced bills, crime bills and all this, you know, so that as well, that helps as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question, you talked about the optional professional services training for the officers.
Yep.
Does the town sort of benefit indirectly can that be looked at as a retention bonus? Kind of as long as you keep
Keep you trained, excuse me.
keeping them trained to the,
In terms of professional development or
Yeah.
the mandated training?
yeah, no, the professional development.
Yeah, well, I mean, they become more valuable. There's no question about it. You know, when like recently we sent 2 officers to sexual assault training, which is important. And we're mandated to have at least 1 female sexual assault investigator on staff, so I sent, I have 1, but I sent another one just to make sure we have a backup. And then I sent a male as well. And that's valuable, believe it or not. I mean, you think, oh, it's not a lot of, sexual assaults, but there's enough, and if there's 1, I got to have it covered, and I'm mandated to have a female on staff. So yeah, it becomes more valuable. Or the accident reconstruction training is really it's an intense program, very lengthy. Those people who go through that, and I have 2, one's retiring actually, very valuable. Very valuable, but they don't get, in our present contract, they don't get anything for that. They don't get anything extra, but they're very valuable. So, you don't want to lose them either.
Right,
And
that's
they become
what I-
attractive to other police departments. We go through, I can sing the same song as Pat. I'm having the same problem. I just lost my best candidate for a full-time job a couple months ago to another department, a reserve officer I had, which I'm really upset, not at her. I'm upset that she's gone, but I understand why she did. She wanted a full-time police job, and she had a master's degree in criminal justice, so why not? But it's hard to keep help. Like Pat said, we're in the same boat. Hard to find good help. There's just not out there like they used to be. I don't know what the problem is. I know what the problem is with plumbers and electricians and all of that. The colleges and universities and the high schools push everybody to go to college and nobody to trade schools. So, everybody wants to have a college degree, which, I get that, but we need service people are important and probably valuable. I know plumbers aren't cheap, electricians aren't, carpenters aren't cheap anymore.
Yeah.
Mechanics. I'm working on the survey right now, so I'm almost shocked at what the labor rates are in auto shops. The mom and pop shop gets $71 an hour. I wish I did when I worked on cars, So, yeah, it's a real problem. Retention, recruiting and retention is a real issue right now. Real issue. It's actually scaring me.
And your 4-legged canine officer, what's the dog's name?
Which one, Hank or Jerry?
Oh, you have 2, yeah, Jerry. So, where are they as far as being eligible for retirement?
Jerry's only got a couple of years left in him. Because, dogs, German Shepherds particularly, start to lose their hips. So they get about 7 years out of him. He's pretty soon. In fact, that too will probably be after I leave. But we're going to have to think about buying another dog, and they're like $7,000 to buy that dog. But yeah, he'll last about 3 more years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Hank we don't own Hank. We don't pay for him, but the school resource officer has a, what do you call him?
Certified therapy dog.
Certified therapy dog. I mean, it's more popular than, you know, ice cream. I'm telling you.
I saw him on stage at the high school.
Yeah, it's
last
all on a
week.
volunteer basis. You know, he takes them with him down to school a couple days a week when he's doing the school resource thing. The kids love him. It's been just an amazing addition to that school resource officer position, because I tell you, anybody, you're having a bad day or something, they go pet the dog. It's like, like I said, it's just like he ate ice cream. Well, to me, it's like everybody loves him. If you get a chance, you got to meet Hank. He's a great dog. He's a chocolate lab. Very kind.
Do you have a question? Okay, John?
All right, I don't mean to prolong it too much
that's
longer,
okay.
Chief, but I'd like to follow up on the detailed overtime software program.
Yep.
It interests me that you lay out, or as Amanda lays out, it increases effectiveness, streamlines the process, and better communication.
Yep.
The above target is $3,720. Is that the annual fee?
Yes.
Would the annual fee continue at that rate for the foreseeable future?
He's not projecting any increases right now.
Okay.
But I mean, we don't have a contract beyond 1 year, so in theory, that could go up.
The whole comment was to set up this question: are there future anticipated savings that you could attribute to having this program? Could it pay for itself?
I think the way it was described, it sounded more like it was value added. That
Yeah.
basically, that it wasn't a.
It frees up time for people to do other things, but there are lots of other things already in the works that need to be taken care of.
And that's kind of where I'm going, whether it would help the police department scale, help the police department cover all the stuff you have to do in a town that's increasing in size, in population, and you see a little uptick in your more than a little uptick in your incidents. There's something that could have an indirect value of helping you do what you have to do with the available resources you have.
Yep.
Yes. The officer, whoever it is, if it's a street supervisor, the shift commander usually will do this. They'll come in off the road, and this happens all the time. You see our overtime rate, our detail rate. They have to come in off the road and go through every, they're mandated by the contract. They have to go through all the full-time officers and all the reserves. So they got to make essentially, well, right now it'd be 7 phone calls. Wait for them to return their calls if they don't answer the phone, because you got to make sure you give them an opportunity to take the job. They're on a list, so they have to be called by the list.
Yeah.
So it takes time, typically a couple hours sometimes. And, in between that, so, they go in, they sit down, they start making phone calls, and they got to go to a call, they got to get up, go out, got to come back in. So you got a car going back and forth instead of being out on the road. I want them out there where the public is. And it's just a...
Well, but the problem is, it's difficult to quantify exactly what the savings are then, but there are some potential savings.
Only in time, all it does is it helps Amanda tremendously, because it would be a real-time savings for her, but it also saves time it puts them on the road. I want them doing police work, not clerical work.
Yeah.
We're suffering. Part of what we're suffering from without the manpower is administrative help. It's only me and Tom.
Yep.
And then, of course, Amanda's our support. And Lisa, who's a desk officer, also does some of the administrative duties during the day, clerical stuff. She does sex offender and mostly pistol permitting, just the entry. Amanda does the rest of it, which is actually a bigger piece of it. But what we're trying to do is get everybody on the road the guys in the uniforms got to be on the road.
Yep.
That's really the impetus behind that, and making her job easier so I can free her up to do other things. Until we grow and I can I don't even have 4 supervisors, I got 3 sergeants, so a lot of the shifts go unsupervised. I got to do that at some point too. a department, as it grows, is going to end up with a deputy chief and a administrative lieutenant. His main job is he's the liaison to the DA's office. That's a full-time job in itself. He works 7 to 3. There's not a day that goes by he's not walking out the door at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a busy, busy job. And it was when Mike Luth was here, the same thing. And it's getting busier. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the guys on the road, eliminate some of this stuff that they shouldn't be doing because they're cops, and get them on the road doing police work.
Well, I do appreciate you taking the time to give me a little more context with this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks
thank
for
you.
asking.
I don't want to hold you too much longer. I'll just ask if there is anybody from the public that has a question. Take a quick, because I know we also have the Board of Health coming and looking ready, so.
Oh, excuse me.
Great. Yeah, Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. Just to build on that, I think DTS, is that there? For 3,700. And before I ask, I'd like to get confirmation, because I'm looking at the budget online, and is the budget that's online, the 212 budget, is that the current state of the budget? The 212, the budget that's online, is that the 212 date? Is that the correct budget? Yes. Okay, great. Because what I don't understand is in that budget, the police budget is $9,000 under target. So I'm not quite sure why we can't find $3,700 to take care of that. If you look at the budget online, the total budget for the department is roughly $9,000, maybe it's $8,000 under target.
Okay, actually, I think we're not going to find it tonight.
Okay.
But basically, the point's taken. I think we'll probably address it as part of the overall budget.
Okay, if you have,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
check that, it
Yeah.
was
No, I understand. I just,
shocked me
basically,
that we can't find that money. Just to confirm on the additional officer, is that a patrolman? Is that in the patrolman line item? Yes. It is. It's like I see 58K there or so. And I appreciate this breakdown that you have. It's great. One thing that maybe the police seems to have things a little different. Holiday pay seems to be on a different line item. Nobody else kind of does that. It's normally in the pay. Is there something unique about holiday pay?
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just don't know how it works.
The holiday pay usually is if an officer takes, the way it's written in their contract, they can, if they're working, they can receive an extra day's pay, or they can take an extra day off as like another vacation day. So this usually, most officers opt to take that as another day off. So that usually is like, almost like another overtime line where the person that's working to fill that shift would be paid out of. So if one officer takes a holiday off, another officer is working for them,
Right.
we backfill it with holiday. So that's where that line, where they get paid out of. So that is the amount of money that that officer would either be paid for their holidays in addition to their normal pay,
Okay.
or where their shift would be covered out of.
Okay, and it's because of that little
Yeah.
thing. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the only other line I don't understand, I can't find in the thing, is the educational incentive. It's like $5,000. Can you explain what that is?
It's another thing that's in their contract. If they have a associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's, there's 3 different levels that they receive as part of their pay. It's a lump sum payment that they get. We estimate them at a bachelor's level, which is that $5,525. That's just for having a bachelor's degree. When they get hired, they get that amount. It is, I don't have the amounts off the top of my head. It's like 2,000 and something for an associate's, and then it's higher for a bachelor's. For a master's.
Yeah, okay.
So we just
Great.
estimate it at the
So you
middle level.
kind of assume they're going to come in at a bachelor, and
Yep.
that would be it.
And some officers don't have degrees, and then they wouldn't receive that pay.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, then with that, we're happy to turn you loose. Thank you very much. It was, as always, great to hear from you. All right, next year, you'll bring banana bread next year, okay?
Funny you should ask. I have one from Coffee with the Chief on my on my conference table, I was gonna take it up and I didn't wanna upstage the whole cookie thing.
You absolutely would not.
Honest to God, I walked out the door, I was grabbing it, I'm like, you know what, Terry's gonna have cookies, I don't wanna. Cause that problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next time.
Thank you.
It's my last shot. Okay, so I'm not sure who from the Board of Health is going to be presenting. Do you want to?
That would be me.
Okey doke.
My name is George Eamon. I'm chairman of the Board of Health here in town. I've been a member of this board for 28 years. It's a long time. I do want to point out that what we're presenting here tonight, we're not going to take much of your time. It's a very simple thing, is the in-town portion of that budget. There's, for some reason, not too long ago in the past, Neshoba Associated Boards of Health was plugged into that. It never was before. Quite frankly, I don't know why it is now. Neshoba performs for us under contract. Who they report to the Board of Health, but they're under contract, and I think it should be a separate line item, but it isn't. What we're looking for is through the years, the time that we've been able to run our office here in town for the service to the citizens of the town has gradually declined to the point where it's unsustainable for us to be able to provide the services locally that we need. We are open Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And what we're asking for is an additional $5,000 so we can be open on Thursdays. The Board of Health is, I guess, pretty darn invisible within the town. Some of it's by choice, some of it's by government mandate. We are a federally, a constitutionally required department, which is extremely important. Most of what we do, if people think about the Board of Health, they're thinking about septic systems and sewers and that sort of thing. The personal aspect that we perform as far as aiding in the public, most of which we cannot discuss because it's personal information covered by the law. We do get a lot of that. We get a lot of calls. We have a lot of weekend work. We do not have coverage on the weekend. Weekend efforts, whether required, and if we get a call, we must respond, are either covered by myself or other times with one of our board members. We're very, very fortunate. I have been for the last 28 years with the quality and caliber of people who've served on the board. Very rarely, if we do have someone who must leave, do we have a lot of difficulty in replacing that individual. People who care about other people tend to gravitate toward that, where it's an opportunity to be able to help people. On our board, we have 2 engineers. I'm a chemist. So we're in tune with the things that we need to do, and we're able to perform some of the duties, not all. Some of the things we can't do because certain special state licenses are required. Our administrative assistant is trained in law. She's a paralegal. We spend very little money with town council. As a matter of fact, we have fought, and I don't use that word lightly, court battles with people who were suing the town or not suing the town ourselves at no cost to the town whatsoever. We don't spend a lot of money. I think in our budget this year, there's something less than $2,000 to run the office. Everything else is that salary. $36,000 as opposed to a $38,000 budget that we operate on. And yet, at the end of the year, we always seem to find some way to give some of the money back to the town. Not very much, but we always try to give some back. Where we are now is that we cannot provide the services that we have been providing. Our administrative assistant donates time. I know she's in that office on Fridays. I know she's in there sometimes on the weekends. So am I, just to keep the shop running. If we want to provide quality service, we've got to do something. This is a very small start to be able to have a few more hours to be able to get paperwork done, or people coming in. I got a call from Lisa Normandin just week before last. Someone was in looking for some Sharps containers. Sharps containers are things that people who use injections, they have to have these containers. We have several in the office that we give away. And of course, we're mandated to keep our office locked. No one's allowed into the office by state law, by the way, unless they're a board member or one of our agents from Neshoba. So we're looking for $5,087, cheap money for what you're getting. And we hope that you'll give it to us. That's it, I'm done.
Well, don't leave yet, just in case. Do we have any questions?
Oh, by the way, I had written a little note, and I think perhaps Heather passed it on to you guys, did she?
I believe so.
Okay. Unfortunately, when I sent it out, I sent you a draft. And I corrected the thing, and I haven't had a chance to give it out. And I thought perhaps I could give you one. It says exactly the same thing, except I took care of the typos.
Okay.
Okay.
So, any questions for Christine? No? No?
No, thank you. Thank you, George.
Questions from the public? No? Okay, well then, yes, now you can go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go home, Ben.
Okay. Try to find the agenda again. I will at this point ask if the, do we have any reports from the town manager or the finance director? No reports from the, yes. And
Just a couple updates. The Neshoba Valley assessment. So we had a estimated cost into the preliminary budget, which was 186. The assessment that was approved today was 189,076.40 cents. And I want to thank Karen. She's part of the finance committee that's part of the regional dispatch center. So we have the administration board, which I sit on, and then finance committee, which Karen is a member of.
Okay.
So that's an update on that. And other good news, and I sent an email about this, was our health insurance number came in.
Yep.
And we were very pleasantly surprised. I don't know if this has ever happened. It decreased 2.45%. So we were very thrilled about that, and I know the school was as well, because that will positively impact their budget as well. So we'll be refining those numbers and get those to you when that's done.
excellent.
Yes.
Before you run off, Heather, quickly, do you know who's presenting next week? I should have just asked. I was trying to find the email. Usually I've done the minutes or the agenda for next week by now, so, but I didn't do it today, so I don't remember who it is that's up.
It is Monty Tech and Sewer.
Okay, so Money Tech and the Sewer Commission are up next week, so if anyone's interested in hearing from those presentations, there will be, I don't know what the cookies will be next week, but there will be.
I really like that cake.
I like that cake, okay. Yeah, everybody likes that cake, yeah. All right, then with that, I'll just ask if there's any public comment from the public.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. One thing that I wish I had actually broached when the fire chief was here, but I think it's appropriate to talk about it now, and hopefully through the town manager, the request will get back to him. last year, during the process of talking about going the paramedic route with the EMS, and kind of this year also, there were a couple of questions asked by this board about the 900-plus calls as to how those broke down, and both years we've gotten an answer, oh, we don't really track those. I think that's a travesty. That data is so important for us to make informed decisions as to how much money we put into a paramedic program. We potentially could have paramedics doing house-to-hospital transfers. We don't know how many numbers of these calls are those types of calls, because we don't get the breakdowns every year. We just get a raw number. I really believe that that data is very important. I'm not saying we don't go in the direction of paramedics. I just think we should have more data to look at that helps us understand why we're going in that direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, the next meetings that we have coming up, again, will be, next week is Monty Tech and the Sewer Commission. And then, again, we'll be meeting on March 14th. We're anticipating that the weather will continue to hold out for us, and we will not have to be bumping our meetings into the following Monday. And hopefully that will hold. I don't know if you wanted to discuss it at all, but one of the things, and again, as we're talking about what we're putting into the report for the warrant, I think one of the trends that might be good to look at, the question came up, and you can speak to it, about costs that in those budgets that rely heavily on external sources of revenue, what would happen if those sources of revenue disappeared? And I think that basically, and if you want to speak to that at all, what your
Sure. So, it really, the library is a good example of it, where they've got basic operating costs being covered by the Friends of the Library. And if that funding should ever go away, I mean, they're not mandated to spend that money, and we would be on the hook for that. And if we don't have a clear picture as to what expenses are being paid by funds outside of our budget, we could have some exposure to unintended or unknown expenses, unanticipated expenses. So my only thought was that, I don't know if we make it part of the budget process necessarily, but to have a very clear understanding of the different departments and what of their expenses that aren't on the budget, but are expenses that are being paid by outside sources that we might have to fund in the future.
Okay, and I think, because the other department, and I think it was because it came up in the same night, it was also...
The Council of Aging,
the
yes,
Council
they
on
had
Aging, right.
those 2 or 3 kitchen positions with the formula funding, they said.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, isn't PAC also considered one of those cases? Isn't that covered by Comcast?
Right, actually, yeah. So if the public access cable is at this point funded by Comcast, and if everybody goes to satellite in town, then we don't have funding for public access cable. So that might be an interesting one to look at too. Although I think that that one's not as well, actually, none of them hopefully will be negatively impacted, and it's also, you'll hear it a lot with the school budget as well, because, like Chapter 70 is whatever the state decides Chapter 70 is. So, so that's also a really big external one. And I know Mark also had some concerns about trying to get a handle on what spending is related to unfunded mandates. Because I know that at some point, I'm sure we'll probably hear from the Stormwater Task Force at some point saying, hey, we need to spend some money on something. And I know that they've been working on that for a long time. And that was the state saying, hey, you have to do stuff. So I think I just want to keep that forward, again, as we get towards the end of the process and we have to write that report, things to keep in mind. And requests that we can hit Heather up with at some point, and Karen. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to address at this time? If nobody has anything, then I'm more than happy to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
Second.
Okay, Jay seconded. Okay, so with that, we are adjourned at 9:10. Thank you very much.
Presentation by both chiefs this year was much better than.